Hi, this is Dr. 𝗧𝗛𝗓, and thank you for joining me for transforming your life and your career. So, who is this for? Who's in our audience today? Well, conscious leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs, and really anyone who is currently in a leadership position or who is looking to launch a leadership position. Consciousness in leadership is about being present to more. It's an openness. It's a willingness to evolve and transform, and it's key to optimal leadership. It doesn't mean you have to be religious. It doesn't mean that you have to be woo-woo. It just means that you're open. So this event is also for people who may be doing really great, but feel as if they could be doing more. It's also for folks who may be feeling kind of stuck, as if the work has been maybe transactional or dry, and who really wish work would be more passionate again. All right, so what are we going to cover today? Well, at least 4 steps to enable you to achieve transformation in your life and career, how to use them and affect enduring change, and how they'll actually help you. This training is based on my bestseller, Breaking Through, a conscious leader's and entrepreneur's guide to amplify your intuition, clarity, vision, motivation, and productivity. Whew. By the end of this training, you'll at least have 4 building blocks for enduring transformation. So you may want to know a little bit about me. So here's some of my credentials, the fun facts. I have a BA, an MA, and a PhD in counseling psychology, and I have 29 years experience as a trauma psychologist and breakthrough coach. I got really lucky. I learned to be a coach when I learned to be a psychologist, so I didn't have to go back and retrain. I am certified by Dr. Herb Benson at Harvard Medical Center in Mind-Body Medicine. I am both the CEO of Sage Wisdom Institute and the Healing Heart Center Foundation, really so I can ensure that transformative services are available to everybody who wants them. And my probably least known fun fact, I've worked with members of all branches of the military and protective services, Congress, and even those in the White House, not this White House, to achieve personal clarity and authentic, empowered leadership. And beyond all that credential stuff and alphabet soup that I mentioned, I do what I do because I love watching people rise up from their circumstances and evolve. I especially love working with leaders because whatever change you make, it affects your families and your teams. I call that value-added feature. So let's start out with pillar 1. You might have guessed, conscious connection. I thought I'd share a little bit about my own personal story when it comes to conscious connection. You know, things didn't start out with me in graduate school or me as a successful entrepreneur or as a psychologist even. I was born different and other kids kind of shied away from me. And unfortunately, that left me more visible to perpetrators out there. And not only was I sexually abused in my youth, but by the time I was 15, I was spotted and groomed by a local cartel. After being held for almost a year, I was sold for $500 and a gram of cocaine. The buyer was just an evil guy. And after being savagely raped, I was dumped at my doorstep. And when I came to, I couldn't think of a reason to live. I couldn't think of any reason why I would keep on going on. And so I walked in the house, swallowed a bottle of pills, and I laid down on the floor to die. And for 30 years, I had this image of jumping up, throwing up, getting in my car, driving to the local church, and spending the night talking to a minister about how awful I felt. But what actually happened, what I realized when I had people to support me as I was kind of unpacking and processing it all 30 years later, is that when I came through that door and swallowed those pills and laid down on the ground, I died. And for 22 minutes, I traveled through the tween space until I reached a local cathedral that held only very positive memories for me. And I knocked on the door until my version of God answered. And I spent what I felt like was the entire night talking to this minister. And I guess obviously it wasn't all night, and it wasn't even a minister. It was this representation of my salvation. I felt so disenfranchised. I felt so ashamed of the choices I'd made, of the choices that were made for me. And I just didn't ever believe that I could be connected to God again. Honestly, I didn't even feel like I could be connected to people again. It just felt too dangerous. And so when I realized that I was never separate from God, that I couldn't be, like, I couldn't be separate. When I realized that, I lurched back into my body, threw up, and only then did I climb into bed and pass out. Why do I tell you that grisly story? Yes, it helps you get to know who you're dealing with, but at the end of the day, what I noticed when I was finally able to again embrace my connection with God is that I understood I wasn't alone. That connection gave me the faith and the courage to continue. It gave me what I needed to get out. It allowed me to change. And that's something that this first pillar is about. When you can listen to your body and you can tune in, that mindfulness allows you to know what's going on with you. You can feel your feelings more deeply when you're connected to yourself, even if you're just eating and you're not just watching a screen or playing with your phone. You'll recognize when you're not hungry anymore. You'll say, "Oh, gosh, I don't need to continue eating. I'm not hungry anymore." When you learn how to connect to something greater than yourself, you'll feel that surge of power that comes from something greater than yourself. And when you learn those things, you also learn how to connect to others. They can feel you rather than just wondering, who are you? Without conscious connection, whether to God, universe, or even something less defined, you'll be trying to lead from a place of limited power. You're human. Your energy is finite. I know when I'm tired, I want to lay down. When you're able to connect to something greater than the self, the power that you access is infinite. Here's an exercise for pillar 1. So tonight, when you go home, put your phone up. And when I say put your phone up, I mean go put it in the bedroom, put it away. Turn off the TV, the stereo, the kids, the spouse. Turn off whatever you have to and grab a bite of something to eat. Then sit down and without any other distraction, sample the food. Allow all of your senses to enjoy or not enjoy. Sometimes you find out when you're not distracted that there are things you don't like. See how your experience is different than when you eat kind of disconnected from your body, mind, and spirit. So often we get home and we kind of continue to work on our phones or tablets or even our laptops, and we're just kind of munching away as we are working. And that leads to a lot of different things. One, it leads to overweight, and it leads to, discontent and probably GERD and all sorts of other things because we're not listening for our bodies to say, "Hey, I'm full," or "Hey, I'm not hungry anymore," or "Hey, I don't like that," or "Hey, that's not on our plan." So just try that and see if maybe you learned something more about yourself tonight. Second pillar, comprehensive clarity. So the goal of pillar 2 is really figuring out, what is the what's getting in your way? What keeps you stuck? Really, it's clarity about what's below the surface that is, affecting your mindset and your action. So I like to call it who's in the driver's seat. Because so often we learn that there's something going on below the surface, sometimes a very young version of ourself, that is calling the shots rather than our adult wise warrior self. So, for instance, in my experience, before I really did the work, before I realized, what that connection was for me, there was a young part of me that didn't feel like it was safe to connect to others. And so I didn't. I told you, I'm a warrior. I did everything by myself. I never asked for help. I spent most of my life alone. And when I tried to connect to people, it was scary. And, okay, maybe that makes relationships a little bit difficult, but we're not just here talking about relationships. We're here talking about your careers. Okay, well, relationships, careers, yes, they're intimately intertwined. If you have struggles with connecting with other people, with relating to other people, how are you going to lead a team? So sometimes, like in my situation, I had to learn how to feel more confident in relating to other people, how to perhaps have a little self-protectiveness without a full suit of armor, how to let people in so that they could get to know me. And of course, when they got to know me, it made it much easier for them to relate to me, to trust me. And as they did that and they relaxed into themselves, then I felt that I could trust them as well. Without comprehensive clarity, your goals reflect only what you're aware of in your current circumstances. Your goals are based on what you believe you desire or you think will work. But when you're able to see below the surface and own those experiences, your vision will be crystal clear. And you, as the wise warrior, you'll be in the driver's seat. For the second pillar, I'd love for you to try this. When you have a moment of quiet, think about the last time you had an experience that led you to feel ineffective or even like a failure. And as you consider that experience, think back to a time in your life where you may have felt that way during earlier years. Where do you feel it in your body? How old does that memory feel? How best can you, as your wise warrior self, support the younger version of you? What does that younger version of you need to see? What needs to become visible to that younger version of you in order to feel recognized and heard? So the third pillar is respectful release. Now, I bet a lot of you know about release work, right? And I bet a lot of you have heard about things like limiting beliefs. And if I tell you, okay, let's look at the mind here. Let's look at the beliefs below the surface that keep you from being empowered, from being strong, from being courageous, from being a leader. There's something really weird's going to happen. And I would say it happens for a lot of you. First thing, guess what it is? You criticize yourself, you shame yourself. If I say, "Oh my gosh, you're really not embodying your power, your powerful self," you'll say, "Oh gosh, I've got imposter syndrome. Well, I've got to learn how to let go of that. God, I can't believe I'm doing that still." Like, how is that helpful to shame yourself? How is that helpful to be critical of yourself? So with the Sage Wisdom Ways, we do it differently. We do it with respect and love. All of the different versions of ourselves, they're just trying to protect us from hurt. I mean, there's a universal truth. We just don't want to hurt. And so oftentimes there are different versions of ourselves that come up and kind of put it all into a box and compartmentalize it and try to, make it all work. And unfortunately, what it does is it keeps us bound to the way we see ourselves as part of the problem. So we look at release work with deep compassion and forgiveness. We look at it as an opportunity to say thank you to the parts of ourselves that have kept us kind of locked in place until it's safe enough to do what we need to do, to release them, to release the things that no longer serve us. So a cute, fun little story. I had a CEO I was working with, and he really took his release work very seriously. And so we were doing a VIP day. And normally in a VIP day, release work is part of what we do because it's great to be out of the office. I often have, we'll go collect stones and then write on the stones and then hurl them into the ocean and then collect more stones and write on positive messages, and we keep those. So I was watching him collect a stone and write, and I was, normally it's about 30 to 60 minutes. And gosh, the time is going, the tide's going out. He's still writing, and he fills up his entire backpack. And part of my job is I got to be present for whatever my client's process is. So he's ready. So he reads off the first one and he tosses it. And I said, "How did it feel?" And he's like, "Oh my God, it's great. Another." I will tell you, there were no less than 150 rocks. And this is a pretty strong guy, but he called me the next morning and he says, "Oh my God, I don't know what to see. The chiropractor and massage therapist, my shoulder's killing me. I had no idea how much I needed to let go of so that I could be present to the person that I am now." So, it's important that we be respectful of kind of what we've become and why. And when we discover the stuff that's no longer working, we do that whole Oponopono. We do the ritual that says, you know, "I'm sorry. I love you. I thank you." We try to acknowledge what we've done for ourselves, even if it doesn't look like it was working for us. And that's what allows us to truly release and resolve. Without respectful release, you'll retain the limiting beliefs and low self-worth that comes from self-blame and criticism. Now, I know sometimes I share that and people just bristle at the idea that, oh, she thinks I have low self-worth. Look, we all have spaces where we don't value ourselves enough. And if we can be honest and authentic, we can move forward. So when you're able to embrace that younger versions of yourself have done for you, you can effectively release those stories and feelings so that you can soar. For pillar 3, I'd love for you to consider a time when you felt vulnerable or small and to engage in the Oponopono ritual. So what that sounds like is that we start out as we consider that part of us, that version of us, we say, "I'm sorry." We really let it sink into our bones. Really feel that acknowledgement for what that version of you went through. And when you feel prepared to move to the next stage, say aloud, "Please forgive me. That part was just doing its very best at the time." And oftentimes we blame that part for not being more grown up, not being more mature, not being quicker, not being smarter. Oh, fill in the blanks. So just sitting with that forgiveness for that part of you and the role it played in your life. And when you're ready, move on to the next step and say, "Thank you." Thank that part for doing what it could to help you survive. It may not have been the right way. It may not have been the best way, but it was way that part of you, that version of you, thought was right at the time. And when you're ready to move on to the last step, say out loud, "I love you." Really allow that feeling to just rise up, even as I consider it and I can feel my own heart. I feel the tears welling up. How important it is just to express that love that we can have for ourselves, even when we're wounded and flawed and distressed and crazy and still all just us. If we don't love ourselves, who can? That brings us to pillar 4, revitalized reconfiguration. So I call this raising the foundation, right? And when I say raising, I mean R-A-Z-I-N-G, not R-A-I-S-I-N-G. So raising the foundation is about sort of clearing the decks. But why do we have to do that in order to transform our lives and our careers? Like, why do we have to clear the decks? Well, I'm going to give you a quick story from my own life. About 3 years ago, the house next door to me caught fire and burned to the ground. It was terrifying for everybody involved. And because I'm immunocompromised, I don't do well with, teratogens, carcinogens. I'm, worse than the average bear. If there is, poor stuff in the air, it's not good for me. So as they were preparing to raise the foundation and clear the property, actually, they encouraged me to go and be somewhere else for a week. And I questioned it and I said, a week? Like, why would it take you a week to clear the property? Like, the thing burned to the ground. And they said, well, you can't build a house on rubble. All right, you can't build a house on rubble because what happens if you do? The foundation is not solid, it bubbles, and the house can fall to the ground. We are the same. When I discovered what was below the surface for me, it was imperative that I took it down to brass tacks, that I decided, is it okay for me to continue to live with this story? Are there parts of the story I need to release or resolve or change? What do I want to build my new story on? What do I want to build my life on? And for me, I needed to take on new ideas about myself. I needed to take on new ideas about what it meant to be interacting with others. And I had that experience of needing to really listen to what my ideas were about God. I had that time and that experience that left me feeling as if I were disconnected. And what I needed to realize was, no, that is not an option. That doesn't happen that way. And so in pillar 4, when we raise the foundation, when we clear the decks, it also prompts us to start to reconfigure, right? So if we've changed the way we think, the way we feel, the way we show up in the world, we might actually have to change what our plans are, what our visions are, how we express our passions. So that revitalized reconfiguration is an imperative. If you changed all these other things, then you've got to change the pathway forward. And it's going to be very important for your team to know, okay, what's the new approach? Without revitalized reconfiguration, think about that burned down building. Your efforts to move ahead will fail time and time again because you've tried to build on a rocky foundation. By clearing the decks and retooling, you'll be able to build faster and more effectively for amazing results. And for pillar number 4, as you consider where you are with your leadership role, consider whether you've cleared the decks from past experiences before creating new plans or goals. If you haven't, what needs to be cleaned up in order to move forward more effectively with your team? Give yourself a chance to understand what it means to revitalize that reconfiguration. What does it mean to retool when you need to? So I'd love to share just a couple of client successes because it helps you understand when you use these 4 pillars, what can happen. I had a CMO who uncovered a memory below the surface that had been driving a perfectionism for nearly 50 years. That perfectionism was based on the memory of being involved in an accident where one sibling didn't fare so well, and yet she did. And her survivor's guilt forced her to embrace her perfection. Oh, I was spared, therefore I have to be perfect. I have to be perfect. And when you have to be anything, it's not as if you really know your own value. And so what happened? At work, she could never just relax into being the expert. She always felt a little stilted. And she had great jobs. She had a great career, but she always felt as if she was just falling a little short. And so after doing this work and really being able to relax into her status as an expert, trusting her knowledge and her experience, not the perfectionism, not the story, not the need to be perfect, but who she had become. The impact was felt by everybody in her company, especially the CEO, who turned around and gave her a $30,000 raise. Senior VP Sales spent his life as the poor little fat boy and continued to see himself that way until very recently. Now, mind you, he worked an exercise program. He got in and did things to help him be self-motivated, more confident, more courageous. But below the surface were these memories and these ideas and these beliefs that he was only just this poor little fat boy. He was no sooner capable of rising up and embodying the salesman that he could become than he could have flown to the moon, until he started using the sage wisdom ways. He found that poor self below the surface was able to meet and support it and have compassion for it, and finally forgive it and release it so that it no longer had to be his story. And as he did that, he found this confidence in his form, this confidence that came through in his voice. And suddenly, he is a commodity. He's making sales left and right. He was promoted into a travel group. And suddenly, his income's through the roof. And he's finally knowing that who he is who he desires to be, who he is from the core, who he is as the light shines through him, rather than something that was trapped in his mind from 30 years ago. So, just to recap, connection empowers transformation. Breakthrough requires reconnection of all those parts that have been compartmentalized, shoved down, forgotten, cast aside. Like for me, I'd shoved things down so deep that I hardly even knew what the truth was. And when I was able to embrace it all, when my CEO was able to embrace it all, when that VP sales was able to embrace it all, when my CMO was able to embrace all of those parts, all of those earlier versions, they no longer had to be in the driver's seat. If there's something that's still below the surface, you have to be able to break through, to plug in all those parts with gratitude so that you can evolve and transform. By learning to use mindfulness to improve connection to the body, we can open the pathway so that we can also be open to something greater than the self as well. And when we improve those areas of connection, we can better connect to others. Connection fuels the process of gaining clarity of both the obstacles in the way and the pathway ahead. Connection to ourselves, when coupled with self-compassion, then enables us to release respectfully and compassionately all that no longer serves us. And connection to self, others, and something greater than the self is what facilitates our ability to reconfigure and retool for the path ahead. Hopefully, this training has been helpful and supports the transformation that you desire personally or professionally. While this style of work doesn't focus on strategic business goals or tools, the impact can be far greater as you invest in yourself and in the development in an approach to life and business that will ensure your success over time. At the end of the day, you can't have a breakthrough in a day. You can have them. You can go to Tony Robbins, you can have the rah-rah breakthrough, but it may not actually endure over time. What is necessary to achieve that kind of transformation is to have not only a structured approach to diving deep, but the kind of support that enables you to not only do the work, but to actually maintain your gains. You don't want to invest in something that poof is gone. You want to invest in something that is going to be with you for a lifetime and is going to alter the course of your personal and professional lives. I will tell you that one of my favorite things is working with people, and I typically do one-on-ones, but as everyone knows, life takes some unexpected turns. And speaking of what life's serving up, in about 10 weeks' time, I'm going to be having a stem cell or bone marrow transplant, at which point I won't be able to do the work that I've been doing with anyone for a couple of months. So rather than continue to do one-on-one work with my clients and prospective clients, I've decided to put together a very special group program so that I can work with the most amount of people before taking my leave. So if you're ready to do some real transformation work, here's how it's going to work. So next week, we are going to be launching a very special mastermind. We will be meeting for 8 weeks, 2 hours a week, to break through. You'll have access to our membership site, weekly video modules, weekly meditations, and a downloadable workbook. Most important, you're going to have the support of your peers while you dive deep and engage the sage wisdom ways so you too can break through. To join us, here's what to do next. Book a call with me on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday so that you can get to know me better, so that we can review the 4 pillars, and so that you can share with me the change you hope to make personally, professionally, or both. And if you're ready to join the mastermind, I will get you squared away. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It has been my absolute pleasure to have you here and have you listening and have you considering how we might change your life together. So I look forward to listening to you on the call next week and to really seeing you begin this transformation that you're so hungry for. Thanks again and have a great day